For this documentary, we'll be looking at the real nature of mental illness, and to do this we'll be looking at ways in which mental illness fits into modern society and things that can affect mental illness. These are discrimination, religion, media and creativity, and treatment. Look anywhere, speak to anyone, and you'll see headlines or hear slander which labels people with mental illnesses as being violent or masochistic. But the sole majority of this is completely incorrect, and the highly uninformed opinions influenced by media stereotyping. So let's find out about the truth of mental illness and how discrimination affects those with mental health problems.
Well, it's a horrible misconception that people like me, I got a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and the majority of stuff you hear in the press or media about schizophrenia is always somebody with schizophrenia that is attacking or harming someone. Now, it's a fact that I think less than 1% of people with schizophrenia actually attack others. We're more likely to harm ourselves over our fellow man. And it is very, very hurtful, just so that papers can, make more sales, just because it makes a good story. Schizophrenic, hurts somebody. There's where the people that get harmed by society. There's plenty of stories, horrific stories out there of people with my diagnosis getting attacked by so-called normal society. Yeah. And it's just a myth. Complete and utter myth, and it's also a fact that I think it's 5% of people of serious crime in this country is committed by people with mental illness, and that's people with depression, anxiety, not just schizophrenia or people that experience psychosis. That's 5%. That means 95% of all serious crime in this country is committed by so-called normal society. So in my view, normal society should be more worried about themselves and far less worried about people with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. We're not a set of people that go out on a Saturday night, drink, have fights, rape, pull out knives or anything like that. That's normal society. We just don't do that. We're a set of people that actually stay locked behind closed doors, and the people with my diagnosis that I've come across are probably the most loving people that I've ever known in my life. Loving and caring people, and the misconception about violence and everything is just rubbish, complete and utter rubbish. It's unfounded. And it's just something that's been built up by the press.
So one of the things that Rethink does and campaigns for is to improve the quality of reporting of mental illness. Unfortunately, a lot of what gets reported in the paper is stereotypes people with mental illness as being violent and aggressive, and they never recover and don't get on with their lives, and we just know that's not true. The vast majority of people do recover. The vast majority of people are not violent and actually very productive members of society. So we're constantly working with media to try to change the way things are reported. And the Time to Change campaign is really about getting that message out there to the public that mental health is relevant to everyone. 1 in 4 people will be affected by mental illness in their lives, and that means everyone knows someone at the very least who's affected. So it's something we should all be worried about, and yet it's still sort of shrouded in shame and secrecy, and that's just got to end. We need to get things out in the open, and through the media is just one way of doing that.
Well, personally, I've come across, there's a very good book by a guy called Graham Thornycroft called Shunned, who described 3 elements of problems to stigma. Not sure I can remember them all off by heart there, but one was to do with problems relating to knowledge, and therefore ignorance, or somebody ignorant, problems related to attitude and behaviour, and then the final one was relating to discrimination. So he identified those sort of 3 main components to it. So ignorance is obviously a big factor. We've got the current campaign, the Time to Change campaign running at the moment, the £18 million campaign through lottery funding, which I think is having some effect. But anything like that needs to be kind of continued and sustained if it's going to achieve any actual change in behaviour.
So obviously we've closed down the old asylums and old institutions of the Victorian times, but really our attitudes haven't caught up with that. And public attitudes to mental illness are still quite old-fashioned, and they've got a long, long way to go.
I think if the media get behind things, I think it's the media that has the power to influence society. I think if the media doesn't change its ways, if the media can just get behind and see the huge problem with mental illness and start supporting people, and not just for me but for the sake of a nation.
Most stigma and discrimination is really rooted in ignorance. Most people aren't really malicious, I don't think. It's just that they don't really understand much about mental health. So the obvious answer is try to find out, try and educate yourself. There is information out there. Sometimes it can be difficult to find out about mental health problems because they're still shrouded in so much shame and secrecy.
You know, mental illness is going to be a far greater problem. And I think if the media can get behind and start showing recovery, start showing the positive side to and the true side to mental illness, I think in 10 years, you know, we could have a totally different attitude. But I think it's going to take probably far longer for things to change. I think it's all down to the media. The media has the strength to create or ruin things. You know, they're the ones that people listen to.
But the main thing we'd say to people is go out there, find out. You do know someone with a mental health problem, even if you don't realise it, because 1 in 4 people are affected. So one of your friends or your loved ones has got a mental health problem, and why not be that person that they can tell? Why not be the person who does know and can be open? You might find that, you know, you get an even better friendship out of it.
But discrimination doesn't just exist in the media, it also exists in the employment sector. Dawn Willis was the victim of workplace bullying in 1997, which consequently forced her from her job.
It did still mean that there was this tension between me and the volunteer, and one day it did erupt into it where he actually verbally attacked me in a room full of people. He shouted and bawled at me. He said I was trying to get the place shut down, all of this stuff, and I left. I thought, well, I can't come back. I was that shocked and stunned that someone had, and he got away with it. There was nobody telling him he wasn't allowed to do that, so he got away with it. I wrote a grievance, and it was the grievance report which mentioned my mental health. It suggested that because of my mental health, I lacked resilience and I was unable to deal with difficult people. I was absolutely devastated by that. I can't describe how devastated that made me feel. It was as if someone had punched me in the face. It was just horrible. It took the last bit of my self-esteem away. I think because people with a mental health diagnosis who manage to work are very damn resilient. We've worked hard. We too have to prove ourselves a little bit more, in a sense. So it was very hard to cope, and it did make me very unwell.
Way. And the rest of us don't count. I've never understood that everybody counts, not just the people who are of the same mind as yours.
In your personal opinion, what part do you feel religion can play in challenging the discrimination in democracy?
I think religion can say that from Old Testament times through to New Testament times and right through, there have been examples of people with mental problems, and certainly the founder of our faith, Christ, dealt with it head on and was enormously helpful to those who were mentally afflicted. Religion today can, of course, go on enlightening people and supporting those who are mentally ill. There are chaplaincies in hospitals, of course, and some people with mental problems will know a priest and will perhaps be going to a priest for help and support. So, by and large, the church, yes, contribute a great deal. But healthy, wholesome enthusiasm is to be welcomed and fostered. And there isn't enough of it amongst Christians today.
You work a lot within the community with your ministry work. Do you feel that this has an impact on the community, and if so, how?
Well, I don't think they're aware of my mental problems, not people, say, in this area, unless they've read my book or heard me speak on the subject. I'd be very willing to inform and talk to people about mental health as far as I have experienced it. But generally speaking, I don't think people are aware that I've had these problems in the past. And of course, through Rethink, I do take advantage of some of the opportunities that come up to make it better known. I'm not sure that it's because I'm a priest. I think anyone who has had this problem and is willing to share it with others can be an enormous help to other people, particularly those who maybe have little support for their condition. I am aware of the fact that some people are in the community now as they would have been in hospitals, and maybe they're very insecure and perhaps don't have sufficient support. And certainly the church should be aware of this and do all it can to support such people if these people want the church's support. A lot won't. A lot will strive to manage on their own, and this sometimes leads to tragedy. A, because their condition hasn't been properly diagnosed or treated, or because they just, for some reason or another, want to be independent of any support. But they are the most difficult people to help. And this film is about those who are involved with community work, despite the fact that there may have been some history of mental illness.
Do you think that the combination of being a priest and someone with a mental health issue can stand to break, or at least challenge the stigma involved?
I think so. By just being what I am, by just being my ordinary self, doing my work as best as I can, and if anybody knew about my mental history, I think they'd be helped even more to see that you can go on doing things positively and successfully, as far as I can measure success in my work. You can go on doing these things and be contributing to the work of the community and giving support in the community without it being a barrier. You know, we're not under a cloud. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something that's happened, is part of our chemical makeup, if you like, but you can live with it and through it, and you can, to a large extent, overcome it.
As well as working professionally as a health, safety and environmental advisor, Steve Walter is also the author of Fast Train Approaching.
Well, those people who've read the book have found it really positive, very encouraging. Several people have said it's quite compelling in its style, and they've wanted to, they felt they can identify with it as well, with the situations that's been described in it, the way of describing my character. So it's been very positive in terms from family and friends and relations and those that I've heard of, generally very supportive.
Why did you choose to write it?
Well, it was a kind of a cathartic process for me, really. I've always written a journal ever since I was a kid, and written poetry as well since I was a late teenager, and so it's helped me to consolidate the kind of experience of having had the breakdown, and the experience over 10 years, from 97 to 2007. So I suppose I wrote it predominantly, for myself from that point of view, but I've since discovered that other people have found it interesting, useful and helpful.
Alongside being a campaigner for mental health rights, Stuart Baker Brown is a celebrated photographer.
I am a documentary photographer. The main work I do is of the Himalayas, the Buddhist people and the mountains. So I've been on about 5 or 6 treks now, climbs, and I take photos of Everest and surrounding mountains, and I've been very, very lucky with my sort of photographic work, because it has been recorded on the BBC again and again, other sites across the world, and I think there is definitely a link between creativity and schizophrenia anyway, and I use photography. I also write. I use photography to express my creativity in the best way I know how, and I have exhibitions. There's always people interested in exhibiting my work, and when I'm in Kathmandu, I take quite a few photographs of the cremations over there, of the Hindu cremations, and take a look at my website, see what you think.
Philip Clements has also authored a book called Sweet and Bitter Fall, a book which accounts his experience of bipolar disorder.
A little bit about my book is simply that it is an account of my illness from the early days when it wasn't diagnosed. And it's a book about the episodes, 3 episodes, major episodes. We call them episodes, as you know, when the person really becomes very ill. And eventually, after a long, long time, many, many years, it was properly diagnosed and properly treated for the first time. And from then onwards, it was much easier.
Jason Pegler is the founder of Chipmunker Publishing, a publishing agency dedicated to publishing books and other works of art related to people's experience of mental health. When asked about what Chipmunker Publishing means to him and authors such as Steve Walter and Philip Clements, this is what Jason had to say. I set up the company to give people with mental health issues a voice, so that they could empower themselves and help others. When I was first diagnosed with manic depression at 17 years of age, I was not aware of anything I could read that described the humiliation and loneliness I felt for being a mental patient, so I set up the company to give other people support if they ever went through what I was going through.
Leave them, the voices say. They are evil, they must stay away. free my mind, let me go and help me find a clearer place for me to be, clear my head and set me free.
And eventually, after a long time, many years, it was properly diagnosed and properly treated for the first time. And from then onwards, it was much easier. And I should always break with that GP, and he was a GP with a special interest in psychological medicine, who did diagnose it and treat it. He said to me, I've got two things to say to you. One is good news and the other is bad news. The good news is if you take this medication, which was lithium, you will never have such troubles again. You'll never have these episodes, these extreme periods again. The bad news is you'll have to take it forever. Well, that to me wasn't bad news. It was part of the good news. If it was going to prevent me from having real illness, then I would take it forever with no problem at all. The danger with lithium, or perhaps with other medication too, is if you think you can do without it after being on a course, that can be really dangerous. Really dangerous. And so you've got to go on taking it. It's as essential as daily bread, you might say.
We asked Steve Walter if he's faced discrimination due to being medicated for his illness. This is what he had to say.
Well, I always find that a tricky one, because I think it's actually quite embarrassing to admit that you have to have tablets to help keep you sane. But like anything else, say diabetes or something, where there may be some sort of imbalance that tablets can help with, then, to be honest, they helped me through some very difficult experiences following this at and during and after the time of breakdown. But really there should be no stigma attached to that. It should be, people should accept that, you may have to have some sort of tablets and medication for a while to help you through, to be able to function perfectly happily and normally. But I think there is still quite a bit of stigma attached to that.
How do you see the UK's view of mental illness changing within the next decade?
Yeah, within the UK, I'd like to be positive about it. I think the Time to Change initiative will make some difference. As I mentioned, it does need to be sustained, to be continued. Any kind of campaign like that needs to be prolonged. So I would like to think that as a UK perspective, it become more inclusive, that people will be more accepting of the issues around mental health.
I'd like to see legislation in place that means that it's illegal for anyone to use discriminatory language, such as schizo and nutter. That includes the press, that includes the person in the street, because we're not allowed to use racist slurs. We shouldn't be allowed to use mental health slurs. It's as simple as that for me, and that brings about equality. It makes people consider what they're saying. When we were stopped from using any racist language, we all had to reconsider what the words we were using and how they impacted. We can do the same with mental health, and we can do that by starting in schools. I'd like to think in 10 years' time that mental health is on the curriculum in primary school. It's part of their PGSE or whatever they call it nowadays, so whatever it is that they learn. where they learn about biology and they learn about their health. It should be there, it should be on the curriculum, and if it is, there'll be no stigma, there'll be no discrimination, because it'll be the norm.
Well, I don't know that I can predict how it will change. I hope more and more people will be more knowledgeable of mental illness and will be more aware of it, and more aware of the ordinary nature of it, really, that people can live ordinary lives despite having these mental problems.
I'd like to think that if we start to accept that, you know, people have mental health conditions, they can be doctors, they can be GPs, they can be astronauts if they want to be, they should be allowed to be MPs. Once we start to accept that, then our nation's mental health will become our nation's mental wealth.